I'd like for us to take our Bibles and turn to the book of Psalms. Book of Psalms, chapter 32. Psalms chapter 32, and we'll look at verse 8. Psalms 32 and verse 8. I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way that thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. This is an interesting verse because when you look at it, especially in connection with prophecy, and what we have been told is coming, what are eyes for? Eyes are for seeing. But you notice the last part of that verse says that He'll guide us with whose eyes? His eyes. Does God see differently than we do?
Amen.
How can we see like God sees?
In the Bible.
Through the gift of prophecy. Yeah, we can see what's up ahead by the gift of prophecy. And there are two books in the Bible, one in the Old and one in the New, that are sort of tied together, that give us an idea and instruction as far as what's coming. And what are those two books? Daniel and Revelation. When we look at Daniel and Revelation, we can see very easily that the control that is going to come on God's faithful people will especially be involved with money and finance. No man would be able to buy and sell. So this is a very important topic because we see our nation completely out of control. I mean, it really, really is. I looked up the latest, and back when we were having the camp meetings at, well, I think this is even before Somerset. This is when we were doing the Plain People camp meetings. This is fall of 1995. In that same area of time, our country was in debt $45 billion. Now, what's a billion?
1,000 million.
It's 1,000 million, that's right. It's a million 1,000 times. And at that particular time, we were 45 billion in debt. And they estimated that by 1999, it would be $6.9 trillion. Now, what's a trillion? It's 1,000, it's a billion 1,000 times. It's a billion 1,000 times. Do you have any idea what it is now? I looked it up on the internet. As of April of this year, it was going towards $22 trillion. $22 trillion. And this whole idea, basically, we've been bankrupt for a long, long time. And the only way we're able to keep going is print more money. Now, if you were having somebody over for supper and you had planned sort of like a soup and sandwich thing, and then all of a sudden you realized you were going to have more people than you thought, so you got the soup pot and poured water in it. Would everybody get some soup? Yeah, how much nutrition? That's exactly what's happening in our economy. So it isn't that things cost more. It's that the money is worth less, and it takes more of them more money to buy whatever you're looking at buying. And the whole idea of a balanced budget drive is just, it's a charade. It's a charade, and somebody said that credit is starting at the bottom and digging yourself a hole. And that's basically what it is. So we definitely don't want to go that route. But God's eyes see what's up ahead, has shown us in Revelation 13 that it's going to center around, the pressure will center around money and finance. And when you look at the Bible, when you look at the parables, like in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 16 out of the 38 parables have to do with money and finance.
16 out of what?
38. There's more in the New Testament about money and finance than heaven or hell combined.
Wow.
There's 5 times more said about money and finance than prayer. And there's 500 plus verses between Genesis and Revelation on both prayer and faith. But there's 2,000 plus on money and possessions. So you can see it's, pardon me?
Is this all New Testament?
The whole Bible, yeah. So we've got to be able to see as God sees, and the scripture says, where there's no vision, the people perish. So this is very, it's very, very important. Some of the figures of where we are, I just heard that Ford is making an upscale SUV that sells for $92,000. That's almost 4 times what we paid for our farm. $92,000. One man, I was listening to his finance thing, one man, his car payment, just his one car payment is $960 a month. It just seems like people have gone crazy. I know when Sarah was getting ready to leave and go to Ouachita and then going out canvassing, I told her, I said, now when you get out in these city areas, I said, the whole thing's a mirage. Nobody owns anything. I worked in banking in Orlando for 2 years, and in the mortgage department, if you're doing a home improvement loan, or if you're building a house, or putting in a pool or something like that, you've got to do a profit and loss statement. And that has to go through the different men in the mortgage department to be approved. And growing up in that area, I knew where people lived. And I'm thinking of this one example. Big, beautiful home on a nice, pretty lake. Big ski boat, probably two other boats. They must have had 3 or 4 cars, new cars. Big pool. And here came I forget what they were going to do. They were going to do something anyway. We had to have him fill out a profit and loss statement. If he liquidated his purchased possessions to pay off what he owed, we would have more money here in our pockets than he would have left. So the whole thing was just a mirage. He didn't really own anything. And that's the way people are living. I mean, you look at these high school fellas with their jacked up 4-wheel drive diesel with $3,000 worth of wheels and tires and special exhaust system and all this stuff. They don't own that. The bank owns it. And it's just make an impression on you. And it seems to be a very contagious thing. And we definitely don't want to go in that direction. They say just the average car payment now is 84 months long. 84 months long. And when you hear somebody, if they're looking for something, and you hear them say, well, I can afford that, all they're saying that I can meet the payment. They can't afford it.
If you don't have an emergency, they can maybe.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And for us as far as Seventh-day Adventist Christians go, when you look at the information we've been given, we need to realize that there's an extended period of time that we're headed into that's going to be a downer, so to speak. Some people think that the natural disasters and conflicts will happen on Sunday and Monday, and then a national Sunday law will come out on Tuesday, and the loud cry will go on Wednesday, and Thursday will be the close of probation, the plagues will fall on Friday, and Jesus comes on Sabbath. It didn't work, it ain't going to be that way. It'd be nice. But there's an extended period of time here that we have to personally get into, have to line up with in order to be stable with what's coming. Now, we can't control what they're doing up there in Washington, but there is something that we can do that will minimize the suffering and maximizing our freedom to witness and do evangelism. If we don't line up with this, we're going to maximize suffering and minimize our freedom to witness and do evangelism. So we personally have to get control of our finances with God's help. This was a quote from a book this was from a Christian person that is dealing with finance, and he says the common mistakes in financial planning are all in one way or another related to debt. Debt and lifestyle go hand in hand in American society. When you use debt to fund a consumptive lifestyle, in other words, you just get. Not only do you have the consumptive lifestyle working against you financially, but you also have the added burden of the debt working against you financially. Both should be avoided like the plague. We don't want to do the consumptive lifestyle. And there are three dangers with debt. Number one, compounding works against you. The compounding interest works against you instead of for you. And it's a trap because it's easy to get in and finish it. Hard to get out. Hard to get out. Debt mortgages the future. But what does the future look like? Positive or negative? It looks like negative. It's extremely deceptive. Extremely deceptive. Now, the control measures that the enemy is going to use for God's people is centered around money, economics, and finance. This is the tool that Satan is going to use to control the whole world and to control God's people. So there's going to be a lot that we personally have to do to get ready for this. The thing that we need to realize as far as this Homestead Finances, probably be better to say personal finances. And the reason I say that is because 80% of the debt that people go into is emotional. And only 20% is math. It's emotional. I want it and I want it now.
Oh, you're talking about things that they got that they didn't really need.
Yeah. I want it and I want it now. Where the math is really working against you. It's not working for you at all. The work that we're to do, well, the quote says, the work of the people of God is to prepare for the events of the future, which will soon come upon them with blinding force. That's right. And to show the importance that God places on handling money, we have all those statistics that I just read. So we definitely have something to do. This personal finance thing with 80% behavior and 20% math is very important to understand. Let's look at Proverbs 22:7. Proverbs, just the next book over, 22:7. I know we're probably all familiar with this. It says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Now that word servant is slave. The borrower is slave to the lender. And one of the ways that the enemy uses, advertising uses to get people in, is deceptive marketing. It's really, really deceptive. And they'll say 90 days, same as cash. Nobody is giving away free money. And a lot of people think they can beat the system by going 90 days, same as cash. Well, you're not beating the system, because these companies that offer 90 days, same as cash are multiplying all over the place. So you're not beating them. So what have they done with 90 days, same as cash? They've increased the price. You're paying for it. Yeah. You're paying for it. And one man says, he was in a confrontation with another man and was saying, that he thought it was a good idea, this 90 days same as cash. And he said, I can go into that same store and lay down $100 bills and beat you every time. And it's true. It's true. So don't let
like a check advance place or something like that.
Don't let this marketing thing work on you, because it's deceptive. It really is. Debt presumes against the future. In Adventist Home 392, we're told abstracting and using money for any purpose before it is earned is a snare. Now what's a snare? Well, yeah. What kind of a trap?
One that springs.
You hide it.
Surprise.
Yeah, you hide it. You put it under leaves, or you put it under something, and then the animal sets it off. So abstracting or using money for any purpose before it's earned is a snare. Counsels on Stewardship 272. Shun debt as you would leprosy.
Is that page 72?
272. 272. So really, we live in a vast leper colony. Now, we don't want to be part of that. We don't want to be part of it. We're to shun it. Deny yourself 1,000 things rather than go into debt. Counsels on Stewardship 257. 1,000 things rather than to go into debt. And another thing, don't go into debt on something that's depreciating. So you have two things working against you. You have the depreciation, plus you have the interest on the debt. And the biggest thing that ruins people, and especially families, is vehicles. Because you have upkeep, you have insurance, you have the initial cost, and if someone buys a new vehicle, as soon as they go out of the lot, what happens to the value of that car? Yeah. So don't buy new. And somebody says, well, I like to take care of my vehicles, but you're not the only one that takes good care of the vehicle. There are people that trade off and have nice vehicles, and they've taken care of them. Or you can get something from a state not estate, but a state sale, where they have records, where they have done the maintenance on it. Don't use tithe to pay your debt. Counsels on Stewardship 258. The tithe belongs to whom? God. That's His. Counsels on Stewardship 254. Your faith is weakened by debt. Now, do we need a stronger faith going into what we're going into, or a weaker faith? So our finances, we have to have control of our finances. Cut down your expenses to eliminate debt. Counsels on Stewardship 255. Cut down expenses to eliminate debt. In Haggai chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, we're given the picture of someone putting something in a bag with holes in it. Do you know where the holes are in your finances? We need to know where those holes are and plug them up if we can. We all have running expenses, but are there any things that can be plugged up so that we can have more funds to work with to eliminate debt that we might have? So we cut down expenses to eliminate debt, and this is where the importance of having a budget is concerned, because we've got to know where those dollars are going. The other thing that debt does, it keeps us from saving money. Just pure and simple. When one is coming out of debt, look at every dollar that you're using to eliminate that debt with as an investment in the future. So don't let the devil beat you down. Look at every dollar that you're using to pay off the debt as an investment for the future. Remember, using credit is starting at the bottom and digging yourself a hole. It's not even logical, really. Okay, we talked about the consumptive lifestyle, and one thing on the consumptive lifestyle I was going to use, but I can do it with my hat. Just kind of pretend or picture this as an automobile tire on your vehicle. When we moved here to Kentucky, we sold our little place in Florida. I told Lucy, I said, this is what we have to work with. This is the money we have to work with. But we're only going to work with this. And somebody says, well, I've heard it's good to live within your means. It won't work. We've got to live below our means. That's what this is. That's the cushion. You know Murphy's Law? You ever heard of Murphy's Law? Anything that will happen, will happen. Because you'll move into your place, and all of a sudden you'll need this, you'll need that. You didn't realize your alternator go out in the car, or something you hadn't planned for on your vehicle. This is what the cushion is. We don't want to live within our means. We want to live well below our means. So we have this cushion. It's very important, especially when you look when you look at your automobiles. The average depreciation is, in 4 years from new, is 60% on a new car. And I've heard people say, well, I made an investment and got this, whatever. No, it wasn't an investment. It's depreciating. And the average depreciation the first year is about 32%. As soon as you drop off the curb. If you went around the block and tried to sell that car back to the dealer, so remember, if you're purchasing a depreciating item, purchase it only for cash. and do not go into debt to purchase something that's going down in value. And we know that a lot of families are in bad shape because normal today is being broke.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just normal. We don't want to be normal. And the thing we want to understand too is that every spending decision is a spiritual decision. This isn't just math. This isn't just math. Every spending decision is a spiritual decision. What does the Bible have to say about this purchase I'm thinking about? What will this do for my witness? What will this do for the people I'm working with? Personal finance is more personal than it is financial. So God has to have control of our emotions and our thinking. Now, how do you get out? How do you get out of debt? The best way that I have heard of is what's called the debt snowball. Maybe you've heard that from Dave Ramsey. But the first thing you have to do to get out of debt is stop going into debt. You got to put the brakes on. And then, if you have credit cards, cut them up. And if you have used plastic at all, use a debit card. Then, the next thing is, list all your debts on paper from the smallest to the largest. From the smallest to the largest. Doesn't make any difference what the interest is on them or anything, just the amount. Smallest to the largest. And then make minimum payments on everything in that list, and at the same time put $1,000 in the bank as fast as you can. If you have to sell things in your garage or sell things, whatever, get that $1,000 in the bank fast. Now why? Why would you do that? That's your emergency fund. Because if you don't have an emergency fund, what are you going to do? How are you going to meet the emergency? More debt. So get that cash in the bank fast or somewhere and make minimum payments. And then start at the smallest debt first, no matter what the interest is on it, and get rid of it. And you're going to go smallest all the way up. Now, why would you do it that way? Some people said, well, this big thing here I've got, that's where my interest is. I need to get it out of the way. That's the thing that's bothering me.
It's an encouragement. You see one
It's
debt
emotional.
gone,
It's
yeah.
emotional. When you start seeing the mail coming in and it has a zero balance on it, you say, wow, one's gone.
One down.
Then you take the money that you were putting on that, plus everything else you can get, and attack the second one. And get it out of the way. And you're going up the ladder, all the way to the mortgage, and you stop at the mortgage. Then what do? You go, Then you go back to your emergency fund and build it up to 3 to 6 months of your expenses. Now you've got a fully funded emergency fund. Your monthly expenses, 3 to 6 times your monthly expenses. And then, once that's built up, then go after the mortgage. Now, why does the mortgage last? It's biggest, but there's something else in there.
Equity.
It's equity, but it's also,
Tax write-off.
yeah, and it's also usually not depreciated. It's usually a more sound, it's a more sound investment, the land situation. So let me run through that again, so I know people are taking notes. Remember, we're looking at this from an emotional, personal side. And the math will work. The way to get out of debt is stop going into debt initially. Just put the brakes on, cut up the credit cards, list all your debts, smallest to largest. Start at the bottom or start at the top, whichever you want to do, and smallest to largest. Make minimum payments on everything and put $1,000, just to make sure there's not any deferment or anything. Make minimum payments on everything and put $1,000 in the bank as fast as you possibly can. So if the alternator does go out in the car, you've got something to meet that with. Unexpected, a funeral, and you've got to make a trip for, God forbid, a family funeral somewhere. You've got to have that money, and that $1,000 will keep that cushion there for you. Then, after you get that $1,000 in, you're going to start at the smallest debt and go after it with everything you can. If you have to have a garage sale or whatever, eliminate it and get it out of the way. And then just take all the money you were doing then, plus anything else you can get, and attack the second one. And then just go right up the ladder and stop at the mortgage. Then go back to the emergency fund and build it up to 3 to 6 times your monthly expenses. And then go after the mortgage. Now the interesting thing is, I heard a real encouraging story about a young couple. And they were going to get married, and they sat down and God helped them work out a plan for starting their marriage off. Both of them worked. He made more money than she did. But both had good jobs. And they got married, and they lived on her salary. And they banked his. They didn't have any debt. They drove old cars. They banked everything that he made. And they had decided before they got married that they were going to buy their first house for cash. So that was their program. Lived on her salary. They lived in a little rented, small, little efficiency apartment. And they just put everything they could in that savings account. And they decided also that when children came, she was going to quit her job and be a stay-at-home mom. They saved up, it was over $100,000. And they found a nice little modest house and paid cash for it. No debt. They still drove old cars. Now all their friends, what were their friends doing? They were going on this cruise, and they were going here, and they were going there. And if they took a vacation, when they had vacations, they just went to a state park and got a tent. Just had a good time together. And of course, their friends thought they were, and they were all going into debt with these big fancy homes and all this stuff. And once they got the house, she got pregnant. And she worked up, I think, till, I don't know, 6 weeks or so before the baby was due. And then she quit her job and stayed home. They had a good birth, they had a child, and they were completely out of debt. And when they would move up in vehicles, they bought another used car. They didn't buy anything new, they didn't buy anything fancy. So it was very important to them. Now, how many when you go around and look in these subdivisions, how many of those people are free, and how many are slaves? You know, it's really sad. And our country is not helping matters any because it's definitely not giving a good example at all. We don't have the privilege of being able to print our own money, but they do. And of course, the federal is not federal. I mean, I understand all that stuff, but still, this is what we're living in. So we have to deal with it. Now, what about a budget? A budget is important because we have to see where our money, where our dollars are going. You can't just put them in a bag and then all it runs out the bottom and we don't know where things are going. And probably the easiest budget you can have is the envelope budget, where you work out, I have so much for my utility bill, I have so much for groceries, vehicle expense. By the way, this young couple, they had their emergency fund in place. They had a vehicle expense fund in place. I mean, they had all their bases covered. I remember this one man I heard called into this financial show, and he said, I want to buy this new truck, this pickup truck. And the man that was running the show said, well, I don't encourage people to buy new and I don't encourage debt. He said, I'm very liquid. I've got, he said how much money he had in the bank, and he had no debt. He had his emergency fund in place. He had a retirement thing in place. His child's education thing, he had all that in place. I mean, he had it in place. But he says, I want this truck. I like the color. I want it. Now, what's he doing? What's he thinking? It's emotional. It's emotional. Even though he had everything covered, you know what the man who was running the show told him to do? Take a cold shower. Even though, he says, I'm not going to tell you to buy that truck. The math-wise, yes, you could buy it. But he says, you just need to take a cold shower and find you a used truck somewhere. But he says the math is not there, and we're God's stewards on his money. You know? So, but the budget is very important because you can do it envelope-wise, and when you look in that envelope and it's empty, what does that mean? That's it for the month. You know, that's it for the month. So you need to gauge out what exactly you're going to be using and put that in, and what you have to work with, and that's what you go with. But it's very, folks, it's very, very important that whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you're business, end of it, we all need an emergency fund. It's very important that we have that because things break down. Equipment needs to be replaced, and that's the way that you need it, especially for emergencies. Now, if you know something's coming, you can maybe gauge for that. But emergencies are something that pop up on us, and we didn't really plan for it at all. So, is there any questions? Now, I'm not an expert in all this, but I'll try to answer the questions. Levi?
So would you recommend for someone who's looking for property to wait until you would have enough money to get it cash, or would you recommend getting a mortgage?
The property is different than a vehicle. If you can do without any debt, on property, that is the best. And you want to realize that you need to sit down and realize, what do I need? Like when we moved here from Florida, we didn't need 40 acres. But to get the cave spring, I had to buy that. So you've got to gauge on what you need, and when you're looking for property, you're not just looking at a house on the property. You need to be looking at the property, and the three things that you really need are, help me, wood, water, and enough space to grow a garden, a big sized garden. Because in the future, the problem of buying and selling is going to be a very serious one. In fact, it's getting more and more serious. So, mortgage or buying property, and you want to look at it and say, if the economy holds out in the way it's going now, how quickly can I pay that off? And you just throw everything you can at it. But you got to have your emergency fund behind you, backing you up. That, you know, the saying, watch your back, your emergency fund watches your back. Okay.
And when you were talking about the emergency fund, after you pay off everything but your mortgage, and you come back to your emergency fund, and you said build it up to
3 to 6 months of
3 to
your
6.
personal expenses.
Okay, so you would build it up to so that you could live 3 to 6 months off of that fund.
If something happened.
Yeah, if something happened. Okay.
I'd just be curious to know what your thoughts are on business debt.
Well, my dad had a lumber company, and he was quite a businessman. And he, of course, he didn't know about these principles we're talking about, but he was good in business, and he carried debt, but that debt came back and bit him. It put a strain on his marriage. What's the number one cause of marital problems leading to divorce?
Finances.
Finances.
Number one?
That's why young people, when they get married, you need to be out of debt. You need to have some reserve built up also. But in the 50s, in Florida, it was boom. In the 60s, it was bust. And I didn't know this after he died. Mom told me that it got so bad that he gathered all the employees. You know, when there's 12 men standing there with their hands out every week, and you're not selling any wood, you're not selling any lumber, nails or hardware business built into it, and nothing was happening. He got them all together and he says, I need somebody to loan me some money. So this thing's going to fold up like an umbrella. You know, nobody. Even his brother worked for him too, his younger brother. And he had money. He wasn't married. You know, I think Mom said he had over $30,000 in the bank. You know, back in the 60s, that was a bunch of money. He wouldn't live to it. And Dad built that thing back up. I mean, he stuck with it. Then it burnt down. And he built it up again, and it caught on fire and burnt down again. So, you know, it's something, debt is not a positive thing, it's a negative thing, and I would, as far as business debt goes, I would do all I can to eliminate it, personally. I saw what it did to my, you know, my folks at home, and it's. I know that's the way a lot of businesses run, but You know, the Lord just, in His counsel, He just gives a sort of a blanket thing as far as debt. So we want to do all that we can to stay out of the the world's system as much as we can. Yeah.
I had a question about the 90 days, same as cash. Was that like saying that you didn't have to pay for 90 days if you were buying something?
Mhm.
Is that what they're saying?
Yeah.
But then after that 90 days, you'd be paying more than if you had gone in to
Well,
pay cash for it.
they build that into the purchase price.
Right, okay, I see what you're saying. It seems like I remember a quote from Ellen White that if we were in debt, that we should, I mean, if you have to eat just oatmeal or something like that to get out of debt, to just, really, really tighten your belt.
Mhm.
I think I remember a quote like that.
Rice and beans and rice. Yeah.
I think I'm
Over here.
This might be a little off topic, so if it's something that you don't want to answer here, maybe we can talk later. But I've had this question lately about Luke 17:28. It's talking about the last day, and it says that we'll be buying and selling. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. I can read it. Likewise, also as it was in the days of Lot, that they did eat, they did drink, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. My understanding was always that there's going to be some kind of financial collapse because we can see that it's almost like we can see the writing on the wall. You can't just keep printing off money. There's going to be inflation. There's no way around it. So there's going to have something's going to have to happen. So I'm just wondering if you've ever studied that verse and if how you can justify or correlate how that works.
The buying and selling, is that what you're?
Yes, it says as it was in the days of Noah. If everything collapses financially, how do you justify the buying and selling? How can you? So that's what I struggle with in my mind. Is that relevant? Is it, you know what I mean? Is that if we're going to be buying and selling then maybe there's a collapse and then it gets better. I don't know if someone studied that, so I was curious.
Well, it says until Noah went into the ark. So that, doesn't it? If it's talking about Noah, or are you talking about Sodom and Gomorrah?
This is talking about as it was in the days of Noah. So Luke 17:27 and 28. Likewise, also as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built it. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, or was Sodom, rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all.
Noah's flood,
Right.
Sodom's a little different. So they're kind
Yeah.
of pulled together there.
It says in verse 26, and as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. So to me, it's context is kind of like it's talking about the last days. Verse 26 says, "Isn't it? And as it was in the days of Noah."
Yeah, and if you look at 27, it says they did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark. Now, what happened on that day that Noah entered in the ark? Close of probation. So this thing could be propped up, to go until, the National Assembly law and the loud cry and all that. If we don't, well, there's two other things that I don't want to forget. If we don't, I've already forgotten one of them. On this, let me go back to this business thing again, because I know you two are in business, have businesses. And I was talking to Levi too. When we're self-employed, there are usually ups and downs. And what you want to do is try to get a more level playing field, so to speak. So when you have, like for my dad, the 50s was up, the 60s was down. So with your business, when you got an up, you got a mountain, you cut that mountain off and put it in the valley. Now you're getting a more level. So don't think when things are going really good, there's a lot of jobs and whatever, that it's going to keep up. You need to hold back. If you need to replace some equipment, we'll try to replace some equipment, but mainly hold back and try to cut that thing off and get it down in the valley to get things more level. But this thing about the close, about the door shutting, if in our preparation, and we're going to be going over some practical things here, not just in this class, but other classes. If in our preparation, and most preppers believe that yes, it is going down, and if we can just get enough stuff to get through that, then it's going to come back up. But what do we know? Once it goes down, that's it. So we don't want to get that kind of thinking, because if you do, you're nothing but a survivalist. We're not interested in the survivalist mentality. We want to prepare in order to minimize suffering and maximize evangelism. That's what we're doing, right?
Well, according to the scriptures, there will be a day where people will throw their money in the street.
That's right.
I mean, it just will be of no value to them anymore. The buying and selling attitude, I mean, we kind of have to do that to live, especially at the end of time, would become a commercial market. None of us is just living off the land and not buying anything from anybody. So the fact that people are buying and selling is kind of like they're running their business and that's all they care about. They're consumed with what they're doing. Whereas God's people have laid their treasures up in heaven. They've made a deposit in the bank of God and they put their money there where they believe they're going. They're not grasping their money. They're not trying to lay it all up in their bank and build bigger houses and bigger barns and whatever else. They're looking to what can I do to advance God's cause. To reflect on what Ellen White gave specific counsel on, people were buying stocks in Battle Creek in hopes of getting a greater return on their stock later. She says, don't do it. She says, if you buy stocks in Battle Creek, consider it a consuming sacrifice to be used by the Lord and to get no return from it. Obviously that isn't the way Battle Creek went. And of course we all know what happened to Battle Creek. It burned down. But those who lay up their treasures on earth are going to be very sad. Those who've laid their treasures up in heaven, they're going to be glad when they see things coming down. And to paint in more of the picture, Revelation describes the 10 kings reigning 1 hour at the beast. Okay, that's approximately 15 days of historical time. They're reigning. They're ruling the whole world, those 10 kings. And at the end of 15 days, who did they hate? The one who led them into this conglomerate, the beast's power. Now, America is a prime player. America makes the image of the beast and causes all the world to worship the beast. So, financially, I don't see America going down until the very end. Even though we seem to be running after debt like there's no end to it and there's no judgment, but the judgment is going to be what's covering America's debt. You have a birth certificate, there are millions of dollars attached to you as a person. You are traded on the stock market to cover the United States debt. So ultimately, there may come a time where the world says, hey, we don't want the government to pay you know, on the debt. We don't want their money anymore. We just want their people. And so we who've been the consumer in society will become the slave to society at that point, should that happen. I don't know if it will happen, it's conjecture on my part, but, you know, we do know that it's prophesied some of us will be made slaves. Some of us will be in prison. Some of us will be in those way out places and will live like kings and queens for a short time. You know, but as the world draws to an end, the time becomes very compressed. Things will happen very rapidly. You know, in fact, it says of many Adventists that our friends will say, "You knew this was coming and you didn't warn us." You know, they'll be upset at us because we knew about the end time and we didn't tell them. You know, we need to be in prayer on our knees before God to let Him lead us to what we should own, where we should put His money. It's His money, all of it. 100% of the money we have is His. How can we manage it for Him? One day we will give a reckoning. And I pray we've sent our finances ahead of us to heaven, and that we're not putting stock in this earth because, you know, it just flies away. You don't really know. I mean, 1929, people didn't have any problem. 1930, you know, a lot of people saw everything they owned was gone. You know, but these things will likely happen again.
I think to back that up too, you said that I see with mine eyes. And so you said that God's eyes were through prophecy, and Revelation just tells us that in chapter 13. It talks about God's people are going to be killed except they receive the mark of the beast. So we know that's right at the end, and it says they shall not buy or sell except they receive the mark of the beast. So we know that there will be buying and selling up to the end, according to prophecy.
And the United States will still be solvent, so to speak,
Somehow.
somehow. Well, I tell you how they're going to do it.
How they've been doing it.
Yeah, how they've been doing it.
It doesn't guarantee
And all they do is they have a meeting and
it.
they raise the debt limit. You just keep raising it and raising it and raising it.
Well, somebody's going to put a clamp on it someday. You know.
So I have a question about a little bit more on the going into debt to buy property and such. Because it's an issue I really want to understand, obviously being in a situation where I don't have much financial needs myself, and but also being interested in things like agriculture. But I had read a quote a while back where Sister White was talking about how land purchased on credit was ruining the property prices because it was soaring them higher. And I was just wondering how a person, I'm trying to reconcile the self-denial that's pointed to in getting out of debt in other forms with the self-denial that it would take to, like the bottom line is asking the question is, would a person be willing to even stay living in the city for a little bit longer in order to avoid getting into debt, going out of the country? Would that be one of those things one of the 1,000 things that we should deny ourselves in order to, build up and be able to go into the country then, or find another situation where we're renting? I know that there's situations where, like for the sake of God's institutions and such, that they, have God has directed them to purchase a property without the money. But I guess just where I'm trying to figure out where the biblical backing and the backing and the spirit of prophecy would be for actually purchasing land on credit.
Well, if I was in the city, and I got the message, like what I'm going to read here. 80% of the people in the United States live in 120 cities. There are more people above the 23rd floor in New York City than there are in 8 western states put together.
Is that 80% of the U.S. population then?
And most of those people don't drive. They don't have a driver's license. They use the subway, they use taxis. Yeah, the greater the concentration in the city makes for greater disaster when something hits, greater destruction, injury, and death. In Revelation 12, verses 6, 14, and 16, God has told us that He has prepared the wilderness for His people to nourish and help His people. The mountains are a refuge. What did the angel tell Lot? Flee to the mountains. That's right. There are 120 cities, and if there was a national emergency, there are 120 cities that are scheduled for martial law.
Wow.
They've been practicing this for a while. And those who went to leave at that time are not going to be able, they're going to be trapped. And those who choose to remain in the cities, this was talking especially about Lot, will share in the disasters that come upon them. Yeah.
I just wanted to write down that statistic you said about how many people live above.
It was either the 23rd floor or the 28th floor in New York City.
And how many was it?
8 Western, didn't say which states, it said 8 Western states put together.
Okay, so 8 Western states that
Of the United States. Yeah.
live above the 23rd floor.
There are more people than those 8 states put together, living above the...
Okay.
I mean, we just have no idea, and we don't want to get in a situation where we're a refugee. If you want to see what refugees go through, look at Katrina. You don't want to be a refugee. Yes, brother Dan?
Well, maybe you don't have the answer, but the question was, is it better to stay in the city until you get out of debt?
No.
Or to move out in the country and go in debt for property?
I would get out of the city, however you possibly can, and just rent outside while you're securing funds or eliminating whatever your debt is. But I would get out of any higher concentration. This one man said our greatest danger in America is not a terrorist attack. It's not a national disaster. It's population density. I mean, look what happens in New York when the trash isn't picked up. People just lose it. Just because they haven't picked up the trash for 3 days. Yes,
Is there a website you can go to find out these 120 cities that are scheduled for martial law?
it was just something I heard in a sermon. I'm sure there is,
Probably more.
things you can go. Yeah, it's probably more. This was a few years ago. Yes, sister?
This is just a suggestion to your question. So if you have someone who's living in the city and is concerned to move out into the country and thinking that they'll be in debt, there are some people or some families willing to work out an arrangement with you to pay them cash. So you don't necessarily have to go to the bank. So instead of paying the rent in the city, you can pay them a monthly payment and you can purchase the land that way or the house or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you can look that up and put it in God's hands and He'll lead you in the right place.
I know Dana and I have considered these things too, because we have many people that contact us. They want to move out to the country. They don't know how. But that's why this camp meeting is so important, because we need to network with one another. Because there may be people who have physical means to do many things that are required to live in the country, but they don't have the financial means. And so we would like to get people to network so that those people can work together. There may be some that God has blessed with the finances, but don't have the physical strength. The elderly, in their age, they typically have resources that they can move to the country, but they don't have the physical strength to do so. And so God's people need to come together.
Yeah, we need to network between ourselves.
I was just going to mention